Awesome. So the recording has started and I'll hand it off to Nicole, our presenter today, to introduce herself and get us started.
Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Nicole. I work with SAGE Seniors Association in Edmonton. I'm the Director of Research and Community Engagement there, and I've been working on the Healthy Aging Framework stuff for quite a few years. So in this session, what I'm hoping to do is just provide a broad overview of the framework and how it's starting to be used. And then we'll have time at the end for any questions that you have. It's quite a bit of information, so it's probably best if I just kind of walk us all the way through it, and then we can just open up time for some conversation at the end. Can we have the next slide, Cindy? So the Healthy Aging Framework has really been 10 years in the making. In 2012, SAGE was involved in some initial research funded by the Ministry of Health to explore how senior centers might be used to support the health and well-being of older Albertans. Senior centers were seen as a community-based asset that could potentially be leveraged to support people aging in place, as baby boomers were indicating very clearly that they were much less likely to move into congregate living than the previous generation. This was a pretty major shift, and most supports were concentrated in congregate living settings. The seniors population was already also starting to grow, and all three levels of government were beginning to prepare for the needs of an aging population. A second report published in 2014, a companion piece to that 2012 report, concluded that if senior centers were going to help older adults age in place, they needed to build capacity, coordinate their services more effectively, and integrate more fully with the health system. The report also identified a need for marketing, which was really just about people not understanding the kinds of work undertaken by senior centers or the ways in which a senior center might be a resource that could be accessed by both individuals and organizations. Next slide, Cindy. Oh, you're already there. Thank you. The Healthy Aging Framework was developed as a way to help address the needs identified by that 2014 report. In 2016, Alberta Seniors and Housing funded a follow-up study into the role that senior centers play in communities across Alberta. The purpose of that project was to explore the practices, possibilities, and challenges of positioning Alberta senior centers as essential community-based organizations that contribute to the overall quality of life of older adults. The idea behind the study was that senior centers can and do offer a community-based model of person-centered service delivery that supports aging in place, but a tool was needed to help coordinate and communicate or market that work. Healthy Aging Alberta, the group working to coordinate the community-based senior serving sector, has since determined that this same premise could be applied more broadly to all community-based senior serving organizations and has invested in a broader application of the tool across the province. So basically, the hope is that the Healthy Aging Framework, which was developed for senior centers, will be used to help coordinate and advance a systems level integration of services for seniors across Alberta. For those of you who don't know, Healthy Aging Alberta is the name taken on by the group working with the community-based senior serving sector initiative. They host this Knowledge Hub, CORE, and the Healthy Aging CORE newsletter, and are working towards a coordinated community-based senior serving sector that is integrated so that we can improve health and social outcomes for older adults across the province. The Healthy Aging Framework is one of the tools they're using to help advance that work. This is the basic structure for that initiative, which I wanted to share as the last little bit of context. The Community Leadership Council at the bottom guides the vision and helps ensure that it's inclusive and community-driven. The center circle represents the infrastructure that supports the provincial coordination and larger network and regional sector development work. On the left-hand side, community and stakeholder engagement has been grouped, and on the right side is sector development and coordination. The Healthy Aging Framework will impact both these main areas of work. So what is the Healthy Aging Framework? It's essentially a way to organize, assess, and communicate the work of diverse organizations so that we might better understand the collective impact they have or could have on healthy aging in Alberta. It's essentially a framework. It's a way of organizing information so that systems, ideas, and actions can be communicated and understood. Think of it as a shared language or structure that can be used by a wide variety of people so they can all understand each other and see how they fit together. The idea is basically that if senior serving organizations are all using the same framework to help think about and communicate their work, then we can identify service gaps, minimize duplication, identify opportunities for organic collaboration, and help make it easier for seniors to access the services they need, where and when they need them. It's a tool that can be used for strategic planning, priority setting, and evaluation within organizations, and for coordination and assessment across the sector. The framework itself is made up of 5 basic components or building blocks. First, the determinants of healthy aging, which are like the big buckets or categories used to organize everything. The service areas, which are bundles of programs and services that organizations provide. Activities, which are the specific programs or services. The intended outcomes, or the things we think will change for individuals as a result of work that we're doing. And the impacts, which are the things we think will change more generally as a result of the work that we're doing. The idea is that if everyone is using the same blocks, we can begin to build better structures together. One of the things we learned when we were doing the research, though, was that we can't tell people which blocks to use or how to use them. That'd be like pre-building the structure and then telling people to find their way in. It would be too rigid, would require too much work for very little benefit to individual organizations, and would basically just be a bureaucratic overlay onto an already overly stretched sector. A key value of the healthy aging framework is that it's not prescriptive. The ability of community-based and neighborhood-level organizations to effectively meet the needs of their service demographics and/or geographic area requires organizational autonomy. The framework is just a way of organizing the work of diverse organizations across varied contexts, serving a deeply heterogeneous population. Because it was initially developed for senior centers, many of which are small and largely volunteer-run, we wanted it to be as flexible and user-friendly as possible. It's meant to be a useful capacity-building tool. Organizations should be able to plug into the framework at any point and populate the connection between what they're doing and why they're doing it using the same language as everyone else. So a small rural community center, for example, could plug into the framework by selecting peer learning group, the activity, and be able to work across the framework to articulate the outcome and impact of their program, thereby connecting it to the work of other organizations plugging into the framework in their own ways and for their own purposes. The determinants of healthy aging are 6 interrelated categories that determine our ability to remain as safe, healthy, and active as possible as we age. All of the work that senior serving organizations do should fit easily within one of the categories. So for example, a yoga class is part of physical and mental health, so is a foot care clinic. A tax clinic belongs with safety and security. Grocery or meal delivery fits in personal well-being. System navigation is part of social support, and the peer learning program belongs in social environment and engagement. As categories, the determinants are quite broad and really just provide a general structure for the framework. The service areas help to provide some definition for the determinants and allow organizations to articulate how their programs and services are essentially responding to the needs of people as they age. In other words, the determinants of healthy aging are the things that determine our ability to remain as healthy as we age. We need them. And the service areas are how organizations are working to respond to those needs. Each of the bullet points here is a service area within the determinants of healthy aging. So for example, physical environment is one of the categories identified by the framework as determining our ability to age as well as possible. It's a determinant of healthy aging. In other words, we have needs related to our physical environment as we age. Senior serving organizations respond to those physical environment needs by providing services related to transportation, housing, and home supports, which are the service areas. So here, a yoga class is part of physical and mental health in the physical fitness service area, but a foot care clinic is part of the same determinant belonging to the physical health and wellness service area. A tax clinic belongs with the financial security area of safety and security. Grocery or meal delivery is a service provided that contributes to personal well-being. System navigation is a part of social support services, and the peer learning program belongs in social environment and engagement as part of engaging with peers. So when we think about outcomes, these are basically the things we think will happen for the senior if we invest in a particular service area. Outcomes explain why we do something. So if we think about the tax clinic as the activity, then the service we are providing is responding to the need for financial security which is one of the safety and security that will determine, which is part of the safety and security that will determine our ability to stay well and healthy as we age. Because of the tax clinic, individual seniors are able to maintain or improve their financial security. The impact of that program is more general and systemic in nature. For example, the outcome of a 2022 tax clinic is that individual seniors will be able to maintain or improve their financial security this year. But the impact of that program more generally is that it increases financial security for a particular demographic over time. In other words, because different organizations hold tax clinics every year, seniors are better able to sustain their financial security even as their circumstances change. Impacts are also the most significant point of connection for service provision across the sector. So for example, another organization might have an employment brokering program to help seniors stay employed as they age. The service area, activity, and even the outcome might be different from the tax program, but ultimately they're having the same impact. Because both programs exist, seniors are able to maintain their personal safety, security, and the integrity of their personal decisions as they age and their circumstances change. The Determinants of Healthy Aging organize the programs and services offered by a wide range of organizations into big buckets or categories, and the impacts explain how those programs and services are meeting the needs of seniors aging in community, individually and collectively. Individual organizations are the experts on their programs and the populations they serve and need to be able to determine what, how, and why they provide the services they do. That's the real value of community-based organizations. We're able to understand and respond to the needs of our communities in ways that no one else can. But no single organization can meet all the needs of an increasingly diverse seniors population, and most are functioning independently from one another. This can lead to gaps and inefficiencies and create barriers to access for the most vulnerable members of the population. The service areas, activities, and outcomes are the what, how, and why of each organization and allow for the autonomy that is so fundamental to how we work. Organizing those things within the framework just allows us to see how all of these individual pieces are working together. As community-based, senior-serving organizations, we've been a system without a structure, and the Healthy Aging Framework is a way to provide that structure without jeopardizing the essence and value of the system. A key purpose of the framework is to help us think about our work differently, and it can be used to help organizations with strategic planning, priority setting, and evaluation. As part of the Healthy Aging Alberta work, we're creating a workbook for senior serving organizations to use to help them do this. The workbook outlines a strategic planning process that basically uses the framework to help organizations answer a number of questions about who they serve and how they invest their resources. So using the language and the structure of the framework to help organizations answer questions about the nature of their community, including needs and assets, their vision for healthy aging and organizational focus, their strategic direction and goals, the outcomes they want to achieve, the activities, programs, supports, and services they're going to use to achieve those outcomes, and of course, how they will understand, learn from, and communicate the effects of their work. Having a shared language and way of organizing our work helps us to build a common understanding and vision. This can help us work together and create efficiencies across the sector, and it also helps us to communicate the value and impact of our work to other systems like housing and health. An example of how this is already being used is a senior center investment program operating and facility conservation grant in Edmonton. In 2021, the City of Edmonton changed the funding categories to align with the 6 determinants of healthy aging and impacts used by the framework. What's being funded is still basically the same, but they're using the framework to help align that funding program to the broader system. And that's it in a nutshell. Questions? Does a lot of information really quickly.
Nicole, is it okay when you're working through the Healthy Aging Framework if you end up with multiple outcomes and multiple impacts?
Of course. Yeah, I think, and that's really part of the planning process and how you go about using it. You're more likely to have, you can have multiple outcomes for a program, just like we do now, right? When we create a theory of change or a logic model for a particular service that we're providing, we often do have more than one outcome, and that's fine. There's only 12 impacts within the framework itself, the odds that you're going to have more than one impact per program depends on how you're using it really. But of course, it's meant to be used any way that you want to use it. Is that the chart that you're asking for, Sherry?
It was Jody for the chart. Jody,
Oh,
is that
sorry.
what you wanted?
Yeah, I just wanted to be able to process this a little bit more.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nicole.
It's a lot of information.
And Sherry wants to know where we can find the materials and info that was presented.
So we're actually creating a primer document that includes all of this information that provides just a broad overview of the framework, and actually includes a little activity to help you use it to create a logic model for a particular program or service, just as a way to see if it'll fit. And then we also have some regional community developers who are working on preparing workshops to walk people through the process, help them learn about the framework. But all of this will be available through CORE.
Thanks, Nicole. Sherry, did that answer your question?
Yes. If we wanted to, for example, though, get a copy of this chart we're looking at right now, is it available somewhere right now?
Not yet, but coming soon to a website near you. This chart will be part of the primer. It'll be an appendix in the primer, and then we are creating a fuller workbook to help walk organizations through the entire strategic planning process.
I'm really excited about this and about how this will work into age-friendly communities. This is really exciting.
Well, and Sherry, we have the regional gatherings coming up throughout May and June, depending where you're located. And we'll have another more in-depth session on that and some workshopping through. And then you'd also be able to meet your regional community developer and book a one-on-one if you wanted to have a presentation or work some of your strategic pieces or your programming.
That's great. Thank you.
Any more questions or comments, please send them our way. And if you need any other slide up, just let me know.
Nicole, when you look at the steps for this, how do you look at it when it compares to putting it towards, say, a program versus strategic planning? Because you might have two different versions. You may have the on-the-ground staff doing the programming, but then maybe you have a board that could utilize this for strategic planning purposes.
I think it really depends on how the organization chooses to engage with the framework and the process. So you could certainly apply the strategic planning process to a particular program or service that you're doing, but it would have to be an abridged version. So because this is meant to kind of roll up into the entire organization. I'm not sure I'm understanding your question, Barb. Are you asking, could you use this just for a program or service? Yes, you absolutely could. Yeah. So for example, even if you just look at the steps that are outlined here, if you're sitting together as a group of programmers, odds are you're already starting with step one, right? Like, what are the needs that we're trying to meet? What are the assets or the resources that we have that we can invest, or the impact that we want to have? Is this a new program for us, or is it something that we're going to be evolving? So where's progress in this area already been made? Kind of just doing that initial assessment to get started. The step two, that kind of vision for healthy aging and organizational focus. Most organizations will have some version of this information that can be included into your program planning, right? Like, because you want to be thoughtful about the work you're doing and making sure that you're advancing the mandate of the organization and that kind of thing. So honestly, it really is the kind of thing that we do naturally as part of our planning already. It's just, this is really trying to align it within a collective vision for healthy aging across the province.
Thanks, Nicole. And Anne, you have your hand up? You're on mute, Anne.
Now I can be heard and seen. My name's Anne, and I've had the pleasure to work with libraries who use a service area response. And it was developed by the American Association of Libraries, and probably for the last decade. And I'll just give an example. So they have 18 service responses. And as libraries have used those, now if you said to a library, one of our strategic priorities is create young readers, to a person, they would know that that was 0 to 6. They would know the type of programming provided. They would have some ideas of how it was assessed. So I have seen this approach used quite well. And I don't know if we have time, but Barb and I worked on a very quick example with lawn, snow removal and yard maintenance. And I don't know if you wanted to we could keep this visual up and just quickly look at that example if that would be useful to individuals.
That would be great, Anne. I think the snow and mow is a really good example.
So as Nicole had said, you can look at these component parts and begin to enter into the discussion wherever it makes sense to you. So when Barb and I looked at this, we thought, well, we would first of all like to know the impact of what a snow removal and yard maintenance program would be. And because we had all the details of the strategy in front of us and those 12 impact statements, we could pick the impact of increased ability to reside in the place that's appropriate for one's circumstances. That's one of the 12 impacts, and tie it then to this determinant of healthy aging, one of the 6, which was physical environment and safety. So already we could begin to say in this big picture, where do we fit? Where does this program fit if we were talking to others about the determinants of healthy aging? And when all is said and done, what are we trying to achieve through these programmings? So then from that, because as Nicole said, the way the framework is organized, if you know the determinant, you can begin to then hone in on particular service areas. So if you ever do see all the content of the framework, don't panic, because once as you know the determinant or determinants that interest you, then the framework begins to become more focused in terms of the material you work with. So because we knew we were looking at physical environment, we could then see a list of service areas. And because snow removal and yard maintenance is fairly understandable and clear, we could say, oh, well, that means we're in the home support service area. So we were able then from impact to move to that determinant of healthy aging to look at service area. And then because we were pretty clear about what was that the activity, we then moved to outcome, and the framework gives a list of possible outcomes for home support. So again, it's not trying to be prescriptive. And again, Barb and I said, well, what of all these, I think there was about 10 possible outcomes might be really the focus of our Imagine program. And we picked 3 of those, which were increased access to a range of home services and support, increased ability to maintain safety at home, and increased ability to manage the activities of daily living. So by using the framework, if we were now to imagine that we were going to try to explain to a board or what our program was about, or we were going to write a grant proposal, or we wanted to share with others who are involved in this area to say, how are you doing your work? We could say, we know how we're contributing to the determinants of healthy aging. We have a focus service area or strategic area for our work. We know what the activity is we are doing. We have articulated our outcomes, and we know when all is said and done why we are doing this work. So we could use it in a presentation, we could use it in a grant proposal, we could use it to collaborate with other snow and yard removal activities. So I don't know if that's helpful, just to to take the theory into a practical example. And Barb and I did pick one that was simple, simple and straightforward, just to, again, help us understand the power of the framework and why it might be useful to us.
Well, I think the big thing, especially because I'm new to the CBSS sector, I found the whole thing a lot. There was a lot of moving parts. So what Anne and Nicole have done is it's actually a set of cards. So it breaks it out very clearly in the steps. So when Anne walked me through it, was my first taste of doing it in the more simplified version, which is what your RCDs and the regional gatherings can do with the different organizations. By the time we were done, it took about 30 minutes for this simple program, but we literally had a paragraph that, like Anne said, could be inserted into a grant proposal or a presentation or into strategic planning. So it almost gave a pitch at the end and bundled it. So as much as we both knew what the Snow and Mow program was, it gave it this common language using the healthy aging framework that if another organization looked at it the same way, they would also come up with the same language. So it goes back to that apples to apples instead of apples to oranges piece.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, my voice. Sorry.
Cindy says we have the cards ready at the regional gatherings, and yeah, it'll be exciting.
Yeah, for sure. If anyone had any questions about that particular example, or perhaps you want to share a little bit about your program and maybe get, I guess, a feel for the framework and how that might apply or how you would plug that in, we still have ample time in this event. So feel free to unmute yourself or write your questions in the chat. And Nicole, if you had anything to add to that excellent example that Anne provided.
No, I think it really is the kind of thing that you need to really consider your own programming as part of, and really it should be evident, like as you're using the framework, the purpose of it is that it's not complicated, right? It's meant to be a tool, it's meant to be useful. And the snow removal example is a good one, right? Because we know that we're doing snow removal, we know why we're doing it. And really the framework is just meant to draw an explicit connection between that what and that why. And then really being able to look at, we've identified this need as being important in our community, whatever that community looks like. And we know that we're investing in this area. Who else is working in this area? How might we work together? Because if we're coming together with a shared outcome, there's opportunities for us to kind of move forward in, interesting and efficient ways, right? To make sure that we're reaching people where and how they need to be reached.
Thank you, Nicole. That was very well put. All right, so maybe we'll going once, going twice. If anyone have any questions or comments.
Can I just ask one question? It's Sherry again.
Yes.
How does this fit with the FCSS measurement outcomes bank? Are we looking at some point integrating this into the FCSS measures bank, or is it a standalone?
So this is a standalone. Honestly, if you look at, for example, the measurements bank or the common outcomes that have been established, I'm familiar with the Edmonton context, so I'm speaking with regard to Edmonton. You should be able to find clean alignment between those outcomes, right? So the way the outcomes within the framework were developed were through a pretty extensive community engagement process with seniors and senior centers in Alberta. So kind of from the results of that information gathering, the outcomes were developed, and FCSS in Edmonton has undergone a very similar kind of community engagement process in terms of developing their measurement tools. So I haven't actually done a side-by-side look at them, but they should echo each other, really, because if they're informed by people living in community and people working in community, they should be pretty well aligned. I know that's a non-answer.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly do see overlaps. I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if there have been conversations between the two groups to see if they could be integrated.
I mean, ultimately, I think that would be a hope, right? I think we're really kind of in the beginning phases of rolling this out. So developing the primer, developing the workshop, moving towards the regional gatherings, completing the workbook and getting all of those tools in place, so that there's some readiness there for us to maybe start having those conversations more at a systems level, right? So as opposed to talking to organizations, also talking to funders and that kind of thing. The other thing to remember though, as well, is that we need organizations doing the work to embrace the framework for the framework to work, right? Like, so if we went to the systems level and said, okay, let's align these things and then just superimpose it on the stuff that's already happening, it would really kind of kneecap the potential for the framework to change things and the way people are thinking about and organizing their work, as opposed to having organizations see value in the framework and taking it on because it's actually useful for them. And then, once we have that happening, then we can look at those kind of more system level things. Yeah, Jody's reference to systems mapping is a good one for sure. And we can, if people are selecting similar outcomes across a particular geographic area, it should highlight where resources are being invested and where they're not being invested, right? So to help identify gaps, to help identify opportunities for collaboration and all of that kind of stuff. And it's really just about having that shared language and that shared understanding of how we talk about and think about our work, because it's already being done.
Jody, do you want to expand on what you were saying about the systems mapping? Because it's a great idea and a great example of how it can be used.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I have a whole bunch of expansion. I just had like mentally, I just saw this little map of Alberta in my mind where you could, highlight the different services. And if we saw a great big desert of service somewhere in Alberta, that it would just be easier to identify that way. If everybody is labeling an apple and an orange an orange. So yeah, that's as far as I got. I'll be a disappointment to you. I was wondering, I just put in the chat because the conversation about FCSS is very pertinent because like FCSS is key in providing services to seniors. So we will need to think through that. Sherry, when you were commenting, I know that FCSS is undergoing some review right now. Do you have any inside information on whether or not, like looking at the slide on the screen right now, would their outcomes change significantly, do you think, in the FCSS world, where it would be difficult to align between FCSS and the healthy aging framework?
I have no inside information. I just follow their guide.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
So I do just want to clarify, Jody, that this isn't FCSS, this is Edmonton SCIP grant. So this is the Senior Center IOP grant.
Oh, okay. My apologies
Investment and
then.
Operating Facility Conservation Grant. Yeah, so
Okay.
it's City of Edmonton, and it's really just an example of the reason why I wanted to use it as an example is because the things that are being funded through that grant haven't really changed. The way they're talking about them and thinking about them have changed because they're using the determinants of healthy aging and the impacts, and that's
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Like that's it, right? So even that simple kind of shift allows for a cleaner alignment.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I thought that it was Edmonton FCSS, so my apologies. But this similar idea, I think, is probably going to work for aligning with FCSS because, I mean, the buckets are pretty broad for the determinants. So, but it is something that we need to think about.
And you have your hand up?
I was just going to say again, I just reinforced Nicole's point about the framework not being prescriptive, because I think as we begin to use it, we may find that some of the outcomes are refined and the tool will continue to be refined to be useful. So for example, there would be nothing that would say, oh, I'm going to take one, this healthy aging outcome has made me really think, but I'm applying for funding for FCSS, and I can see there's just a slight nuance in language, and so maybe I use that for the funder. So I think we should really see this tool as a living tool. And I like the image of building block, because for those of us who, I know not all of us do, like strategic planning, but if you like to plan, to have the blocks already in play and begin to be able to work with those ideas, maybe you refine them a little bit. You can see perhaps in those two building blocks something you've never thought of before, is an amazing asset, because I think we spend a lot of time in strategic planning just trying to figure out how to articulate an idea. So I really see this at that idea of building blocks as very exciting. So now we have this toolkit and we can begin to have common conversation and articulate ideas and have some definition behind ideas. And I think we've all been in a struggled conversation where after 15 minutes, we all realized we were trying to say the same thing. And I think this tool is really going to help us either be able to identify areas of commonality or areas where we do see a different dimension or perspective, and then begin to work through those things. So I'm quite an enthusiast, so I'll stop the sales pitch, but I just think if you like planning, you'll be very excited as you dig into this.
Well, and I think it has multiple purposes, because I'm the Edmonton Regional Community Developer, and we'll have 5 throughout the province, 1 for each roughly AHS zone. So as the 5 get together and start talking about the organizations we're connecting to, because we're trying to build a constellation of networks, we'll have that common language even through that, when we know what people want to do for their impact and their outcomes and their strategic planning, all those pieces. It'll be the same idea as what Anne was saying, is we may all be saying the same thing, and it takes us 15 minutes into the meeting. This way we come forward and we almost have that little pitch for each group, and we can start helping build collaborative relationships, opportunities to collab on grants or programs and projects, or peer-to-peer mentorship for organizations, because they will all be having the same language.
Awesome. Well, that was a very rich discussion. So last chance for you to share your thoughts, comments, or questions before we wrap up. We do have some time, so that if you do want to ask your questions, you can stay behind. Think of it like an in-person event where you would kind of linger around and talk to the presenters afterwards. But if no one has any more questions to ask, we can head into thank you. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate everyone coming on a Monday morning, and would love to invite you to fill out the event survey. I put it in the chat box. This will really help us understand what you enjoyed about today's learning session and how we can improve in the future. We are hosting, once again, the regional gatherings that will be starting in May, and there will be time dedicated in those regional gatherings to really dive deep into this framework and an opportunity to workshop it. So as mentioned before, you will be able to kind of play with the cards that we've created and kind of manipulate the framework in that way. But please register and come to the regional gatherings if you're interested. So I'll leave the link again in the chat box. There you go. If you have not already done so, please check out Core Alberta at corealberta.ca and create a free membership to kind of stay in the loop on the latest sector news and events. If you would like to connect directly with the Healthy Aging Alberta team, please contact us at healthyaging@calgaryunitedway.org. I'll leave it in the chat. And thank you once again for being here today and giving us your time. I'll give you some back, but if you would like to stick around, please stay on. Until then, wishing you a really great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.